Hi, everyone. This is Sister Elizabeth, and you're listening to In the Company of Charity, the podcast of the Daughters of Charity. And I am joined, as usual, by my favorite co-host, Sister Liz Schoberg.
Hello. How's it going?
It's going very well. How are you doing?
Good, good. For the listeners out there, we will actually be seeing each other shortly
We
for
will.
retreat.
Yes, I know. I can't believe it. I'm excited. Retreat on St. Louise de Marillac. And so maybe after retreat, our next co-host chat or something, we could talk a little bit about St. Louise.
That
And
would
you
be
learn a little
awesome.
bit more about her,
Well, and I will learn much, I'm sure, and
in
have
a
8 glorious days of silence to integrate it
Yes,
all.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm very prepared, even though I am in the midst of moving to St. Louis. So yeah, I'm moving in a week, July 10th. And but in the meantime, on my way there, I'll stop and spend some time giving this retreat on St. Louise de Marillac. So that's exciting for me. And it's exciting because I get to see you and a whole bunch of other
Yes.
sisters, but I get to
A
see you
lot
too.
of very cool sisters are going to be
And
there. I'm excited. All my sister
it's
friends.
Yeah, all my sister friends too, so it's exciting. It's really exciting. But we also have a very exciting episode today that you'll be listening to. Sister Liz interviews a friend of hers, someone she's had acquaintance with over the years,
Mhm.
and got in touch with Mike Tenney, who is the host of Pop Culture Catechism. And I was fascinated by this interview. I found him to be very engaging, as I said, charismatic, maybe not in the charismatic renewal sense, but charismatic in a man who definitely has joy and energy around his faith,
Mm.
and around the Catholic faith, especially. And I also found him to be someone who is very discerning. He talks about finding the good, the true, and the beautiful in like everything. That even things that we may or may not agree with in the culture, that we can seek it and try to find it, and that God is in there somewhere, trying to get His message out. And so I found that part of the interview really, really interesting. But tell us a little bit. I know you don't want to give away a lot of the interview, but
Yes.
Mike, from back in your
Way
early,
back when
way
we
before,
volunteered.
yeah, way before you were a daughter of charity.
Yeah, so we both of us did the Cap Corps program with Capuchin Youth and Family Ministries, and I was 2004, 2005, and he was the following year. And so we have a lot of mutual friends, and just a really cool guy. And I think as someone who really appreciates music, I love to sing and play guitar, and just I always tell people that my head is full of 90% song lyrics and then 10% of everything else. So there's just not a lot of room in there for other stuff aside from song lyrics that I from the 90s and 2000s. Um, but I really, I think there's music has such a power to bring people together and to cross boundaries and to help people to pray. And I appreciate that. And Mike has a really cool voice, very talented guitarist, musician. And so totally recommend that everybody go and listen to Pop Culture Catechism, not just a podcast, but he has videos online on YouTube as well. So it's yeah, it's just really cool to have this kind of cross pollination of the podcasts.
Yeah, I think I was really interested in the music selections and the artists that he chooses to interview. I mean, you had Beyonce, they had a conversation about Adele, conversations just about real contemporary artists, as well as some Christian artists, and just how the culture is expressed in their music, but also about how the church expresses itself, in the culture as well, and how those things sometimes can clash, sometimes they can find union, sometimes they go right hand in hand. So I found that really, really interesting in the conversation you had with him. I think that you and I should we should maybe get someone else in here to interview you on your 90% lyrics and maybe some of your own music, could sing a song for us or something,
Yeah. Well,
Hey, you can hear all the audience, everyone is listening, go, yeah, Sister Liz.
our tangential story, and then we'll get to the interview, but we went on a road trip with Sister Jean, who's an elder in our community. And I said, Sister Jean, when did you go to high school? And she said, it was in the 50s. And so I said, well, let's listen to a mix from Apple podcast or Apple Music from the 50s. And I tell you, I think I knew more songs than she did.
Yeah. Well, if she entered in the 50s, she didn't hear any of those songs. So no, Sister Jean was not engaged in the culture the way a young sister or a new member of a community might be today. So yeah.
It was fun, but she was like, oh, I remember that. Oh, I remember that song. Oh. Yeah. It was cute.
And isn't it interesting how you, who in 1950, I mean, I wasn't even born in 1950, and I always feel like the old girl here, that we know those songs, like we were there and we sang them. Yeah, they're like just eternal. They last forever. Yeah, but that's part of the 90% lyric in your head, is that?
Exactly. It's all song lyrics up there.
It's all song. It's all up there. It's all up there.
But we love you guys. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and it's been fun. So next time you hear from us, you'll get to hear about all the stuff about retreat and good things happening. But more to come. And keep in touch with us. We have companyofcharity@gmail.com, and we are on Instagram, Company of Charity Podcast. So let us know your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Well, welcome everybody. It's Sister Liz here, and I am absolutely delighted to have a friend on, Mike Tenney. Welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Now, this is our humble podcast. I know you have a much bigger reach, but I'm glad that you could take a step down and come to us and just kind of give us some of your wisdom. But just first of all, thank you so much for what you do with Awaken Catholic. Great, great ministry.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I run a show on Awaken Catholic called Culture Catechism. We've been doing it almost 2 years now, and it's been doing pretty well, which is great. But you were one of my first guests. You came in and we talked when Taylor Swift had dropped her folklore album in the middle of quarantine, and all of us were in our feelings about it. I reached out to you just because I thought you would be a good voice for that, and it turned out to be a great conversation. It was our second or third episode, still one of my favorites. And so I've been wanting to return the favor for a while for having you on. And I love the ministry of the sisters, and I love what you do. You just guys have a heart for Jesus, heart for the poor. I feel honored. I feel like anything I get to do with you guys is hitting the big time. So
fantastic. So, but before we dive in, I think we do have to embrace our Northern Virginia, DC metro area connection and say hello to all the people that we know in common. And even from our time as volunteers with Capuchin Youth and Family Ministries, say that 3 times fast. From many, many years ago when we were young. I was going to say young and dumb, but young and wise for our age at that time.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Very good.
You go ahead.
Oh, so shout out, of course, to both a Northern Virginia and a CYFM connection, Ed Rogers and his wife Liz. So, who else do we know together from DC? I'm trying to remember.
Well, Marie Jokum, that's a big one. Big Catholic University people.
Yep, that's where I went. So that's where I know Marie from.
And then I would always say the Diocese of Arlington Youth and Young Adult Ministry connections, yes. Christina Jerian, Kevin Foley. Yep. Mm-hmm. There's so many good people in that area doing a lot of good work. People.
Yep. Yeah, I just got to do music for their big middle school day that they did, and Dan Harms was the speaker, and me and my buddy Brian Rude got to do music. It was a beautiful day, and like 800 middle schoolers. It was a fun time. The bishop came, so love when the bishops come and hang out with our youth.
That's so good. And of course, CYFM probably is a little unknown to most people, but the Cap Corps volunteers with the Capuchin Franciscans and Doing retreat work up in Beacon, New York was a blast. We weren't in the same year, but I think we had that same experience of living community and doing retreat work, which was a real gift.
Yeah. And Ed and Marie, who we already talked about, were two of my best friends from Catholic U, and they lived with you. And then Friar Fred, Brother Lake,
Yes.
Friar Eric, who else we need to shout out? Tom Brinkman.
Tom Brinkman, of course, the man himself. But I think we learned a lot. And when I think about my own trajectory of going into ministry and doing that prior to becoming a sister, I think that's part of what set me up for doing well in community, is to have those experiences of living with others and working hard and,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, we were basically youth ministers, right? Like we ran a youth ministry program on the weekend, and we were doing retreats and confirmation retreats all the time. It's where I really found my passion as a speaker, an evangelizer. Like I had gone to college as an English and secondary education major, and then I did my volunteer year with Cap Corps, largely because of Ed and Marie. And after that, I was like, "Ooh, I got to be front lines for Jesus. This is where it's at." So I got a theology degree, and I taught Catholic high school theology for 14 years after that, and doing campus ministry and youth ministry. So CYFM was definitely a launch pad for that. But also, as you were saying, living in community. I'm married, but I grew up without any sisters, and most of my cousins are boys. I grew up in a very male world, very into athletics. I was a wrestler. I was a soccer player. I was in Boy Scouts. I always said I didn't know what a girl was till I was like 15. And then at Cap Corps, I was living in community. I was the only guy with 4 girls. And it was kind of a crash course in the feminine genius, if you will. And I learned a lot that year. And God bless those girls. Because I very quickly fell into the annoying brother role and playing pranks on them and that sort of thing. But also there was a real tenderness and friendship between us. And I think it taught me a lot about what it's like to have sisters. Now that I have a daughter, now that I have a wife, there's a lot of lessons I learned that year about just like interactions between men and women, and how I, particularly my own personality, relate to the women in my life, and how I can be a gift to them and how they can be a gift to me. Like so many of those lessons I started to learn that year. So it was really beautiful, both ministry wise and personally.
And we can't fail to mention that you are a musician and an artist. And maybe, I don't know if you can speak a little bit about what is it about music for you that is such a core part of your own spirituality and your prayer life?
It's interesting because I, like I said, I kind of grew up as a jock, but there was this part of me that always kind of liked performing. I was like doing like kind of funny voices, and I was kind of wanted to take the music class, but I just thought that wasn't cool. I thought, well, what boys do is we're good at sports, and that's how you're like a real man. And there was a real spiritual awakening for me in high school. I went on a Kairos DDA type retreat with my youth group, and really on that retreat, I feel like I'd always been Catholic, but that was the experience where I was like, oh my gosh, this Jesus guy is real, and he's like speaking to my heart. I like learned how to pray in a deeper way. I like had my first like real honest confession, and I just met other young people who were like alive for Christ and unashamed, and were like living with a different sort of freedom, and they weren't just like shackled by this need to be popular or accepted. And they were willing to talk about their struggles. They were willing to let down their walls and let down their masks. And that just spoke so powerfully and kind of broke through some of the hardness of heart that I had. And I remember being on that retreat, and we're having like some quiet time. I had just gone to confession, and I kind of had this thought. It was around the same time we were registering for classes. And I was like, you know what? I've always kind of wanted to get into music. I'm going to sign up for chorus next year. And so I signed up for chorus. That same summer was kind of providential. My brother like brought home a guitar, and then he just left it there when he went back to college. So like there was a guitar laying around, and that's really when I got into music. So my faith journey and my music journey really did coincide. I became best friends with a girl who was Presbyterian and was running a Bible study out of her basement, and I came and like played guitar and learned all these praise and worship songs. And then my youth group started using me as like music minister, and all of a sudden I was a music kid. And by my senior year, I was like in the lead at the school musicals at the same time I was growing in faith. So really, faith and music for me have always kind of gone together. And for a while, I did a lot of music ministry in college, but afterwards, and also at CYFM, I got to do some with you when we were up there. I really wanted to be a rock star and like win Grammys and have the adulation of the crowds throwing their praise at me while I was rocking out to stadiums of 50,000 people. I think there were a couple clubs I played that maybe had 50 people in them. I think that's about as big as I got.
Hey, 50's
And I
not
think
bad.
not bad. I think our band was pretty good. I think I was a decent songwriter. But just over time, I think the more the Lord grew with me and my prayer life deepened, and I just kind of grew and matured, the more I realized that I didn't really need that praise of other people. And I started to do more music in terms of ministry. I started to play more at my church, which I'd always done some, but I started to do it more. I started to get more calls from people. Oh, can you come lead music for this camp that we're doing, or come to this conference, or come to this retreat? And I really just found I loved worshiping and with music, and it's such a way that draws people in. It can really pull people in and kind of break, kind of like I spoke about, it kind of broke through the hardness of my heart. So I love that music can move us. And if you read the scriptures, the command to sing is pretty much the most prominent command in the Bible. Like, more often than God tells us not to kill people, he tells us to sing. Not that it's more important to sing than to not kill people. Not killing people is pretty important, but the command to sing is not just said like once or twice. It's like dozens, maybe hundreds of times throughout the scriptures. Sing to the Lord a new song, sing to him these ancient hymns, sing to him with this instrument, and this instrument, and this instrument. Like, it's just throughout. The scriptures are replete with commands to sing. And there's something about that breaks through our hardness of heart and reminds us who is worthy of praise. And that when we praise him, it kind of resets our priorities and reminds us that this is our God. He is where we find our peace, and our hearts are restless until we rest in him. So that's what it does for me. That's what I found it does for the youth that I work with and the adults that I work with. And it's beautiful, I think. So, which is part of the reason I started a pop culture podcast primarily about music, because I think God, even through the secular songs, like, he's speaking through so many of these artists. So I see that in there.
I mean, as someone who we pray the Psalms regularly, daily, and I myself have a deep love and appreciation for good praise and worship music. I think there's something that really, it's the rhythm of it, it's the mantra, it's the way you wake up with a song in your head or a refrain that you can't get out of your head, and it's almost like it becomes imprinted on your spirit, on your soul, they used to call it ejaculatory prayers, for lack of a better word, like just praying without ceasing. And I see that music really does that, doesn't it? It seeps into our souls, and then wow, it just comes out at random times, and even at times when we don't even know that we need it. Here comes that prayer that can come from having listened to good music, from having played good music and sung these refrains.
So this might seem like a weird question, but have you watched the most recent season of Stranger Things on Netflix?
I haven't. No.
Okay. Well, so a little bit of spoilers for season 4. I'm all into pop culture, so this is where my brain goes. But there's like a bad guy that like is able to like kind of control people in this show, and the way that people are able to break free is by like remembering their favorite song, and for some reason that like reconnects them to reality. And I was like, that is totally like what music actually does for us. Like, good music, liturgical music, and even like the memorized prayers and chants and things we learned growing up. If we grew up in the faith, like those things so often can help us when we're in that deep, dark place, and we remember this refrain, or we listen to that song, or we remember this prayer, these things that are liturgical and ritual, and they're mantras in our heads. You wake up with them. Like, those things so often can break through our darkness and reach us. And so anyway, that's just what it made me think of, because I think that's a real truth in the spiritual life.
Absolutely. Talk a little bit about how you came to Awaken Catholic, and was that your idea for Pop Culture Catechism, or did they come to you with it? How did that come to be for you?
Yeah, so I've been teaching Catholic high school theology for a while, and then I started getting, especially once my band had kind of stopped playing. It wasn't like a big angry Beatles breakup or anything, but just like our drummer moved to Florida, and we were all getting married and having kids. And it just kind of wasn't as much of a priority for us anymore. It kind of went different directions, and I started to get more and more calls to come give a talk here, or come do music here. And so I started this Mike Tenney Music Ministry with like a website and everything. And, starting to get busier and busier and busier. And kind of online, I became connected with other people kind of who were doing that same thing. And I met online this guy, Nick Devatore, who's from Ohio. And he and his wife are amazing musicians and video and audio producers. And he and I just kind of became friends. It started with comment in a Facebook group, which turned into a private message. And then we started talking on Marco Polo, and like now he's one of my best friends. And he was starting a speaking ministry to like do retreats and parish missions. And that was in January of 2020 when they did their first event. And then of course, in February and March of 2020, we all know what happened.
We had a little something happen.
Yeah. So like he and his wife had like quit their jobs and like, we're full in on this. The Lord is calling us to this. And then COVID shut everything down. And they're like, well, time to pivot. And so they started launching. They're like, well, we have all this audio and video production skills. And they built a studio in their house and started reaching out to people that they thought might be good for a show. And he reached out to me and he said, is there a world in which you would come to Ohio every few months and film a podcast? And I looked at my wife when I got the message, and she's like, yeah, you would be awesome at that. You should totally do that. And one thing about my wife, we totally support each other's dreams. Like when, one of us has a crazy idea about something we want to do, we're like, yes, go for it. You would rock that. So I said, yeah, we'll do it. He's like, I never thought you would say yes. So I started to come up with ideas for a show. And I originally thought it was just going to kind of be album reviews, whatever, when Justin Bieber comes out with his new album, I would do a review. And then it started to expand over time to movies and to artists. It's taken a little while for me to craft it. So we do about 2/3 music, 1/3 movies and shows. And it's just kind of caught on. And I feel like, my experience as a teacher really works well for talking through kind of controversial topics sometimes, and topics of the faith in a dialogue, and just kind of seeing where the conversation goes. And then, I have some knowledge of the Bible and the Catechism and the saints and church history from my studies and my teaching. And so I'm able to bring all that in. I've just been able to talk to some awesome people like you and other people that I know and have met. And so it's been a beautiful ride for the first 2 seasons. And we're up past 40 episodes now. It's gone pretty well. I'm really enjoying it. So
Pop Culture Catechism, everybody.
Pop Culture
Gotta
Catechism, yeah.
get in on it. And there's some really, really cool content on there.
Thank you.
The interviews you've done and talking through some of these kind of stickier situations and concepts, I think it's really good.
Yeah, Beyonce episode that just came out, we talked about racism and feminism and all sorts of stuff. And it's cool. Just in the last couple of days, I've had 3 different people reach out to me with stories about like, hey, thanks for your podcast, because there's this Buddhist couple I know who I put them onto this, and now they listen to every episode, and they're talking about God and Jesus for the first time. I was like, oh my gosh. And then somebody else, his daughter, they weren't going to let her go see, she's like a sophomore, they weren't going to let her go see the new Spider-Man movie. And she was like, well, there's a Pop Culture Catechism episode on Spider-Man. They're like, well, if you watch that episode, you can go see the movie. And then somebody reached out to me. She said, my little brother, he grew up in the faith, but now he's an atheist. And but he's been listening to your show, and he's starting to ask me questions about faith again. So just in the past 2 or 3 days, I've gotten several of those messages. And so it's cool when those things happen. There's little confirmations that like, all right, the Lord is touching people. The Lord is using this. And it's just, it's really humbling for me, because for me, it's, it's fun.
Well, and in the church, we're supposed to be missionary. We're supposed to evangelize. And this is, I think it's such a beautiful way to reach these folks who maybe, have left the faith or have some really tough questions that they felt like haven't been answered. How do you see this all fitting in with the church's mission to all nations?
Well, so one of my heroes is Pope John Paul II, who was our Pope 2 popes ago, and he launched this idea of the new evangelization. If you think about the old evangelization was, most of the world wasn't Christian, Christianity was like in the Middle East and in Europe, and then we needed to go out to all the world and send these missionaries all over the place, like the Daughters of Charity and various other orders. And but he says, now a lot of the world is Christian, at least nominally so, but a lot of people have forgotten. And so they've been baptized, they have the rituals, it's kind of like a cultural Catholicism and a cultural Christianity in a lot of ways. But people think they know the gospel, but they don't. It's like if somebody came up and said, oh, I have this new musical artist, you're going to love them, they're so amazing. Oh, who's this amazing artist? Madonna. Is like, okay, well, Madonna might be amazing, but she was amazing 30 years ago. Like now it's like, okay, Madonna has a new album, like who cares, And that's how a lot of people feel about Christianity. It's like, okay, I know that. Yeah, Jesus died for our sins, even though they've probably never thought about what Jesus died for our sins actually means, or even what sin is, or even what being saved is. And so we need to find ways to repropose the gospel to a world that thinks they already know what it is, that thinks they already know the good news. It's not news, it's old news, right? It's not even news anymore. So we need to find ways to make that news new, and to help people see that this news really is good. It's good news to be proclaimed to captives of all sorts of physical poverty and spiritual poverty. And so that's really what I feel like I'm doing here is music, because it can be such a vehicle for crossing cultural divides, age divides, and spiritual divides, that we can find truth in these songs and in these movies and shows that we're watching. And it can bring us together. So that's really what I'm trying to do.
There was a time when I was in college where I kind of swore off popular music. Like, I'm only going to listen to contemporary Christian music. And I really felt quite strongly that was what I needed. And maybe that's what I needed at the time, right? To kind of really kind of shift my gaze and my allegiance to God, to the Lord. And I feel like over time things have shifted in a sense of finding the good, true, and beautiful in all places and in all venues. There are people who would say, well, like U2, for example. I think they're a good example of, you would call them a great band or a secular group, but yet there's so many common threads that relate to our faith, and that someone who has that sort of eternal mindset or a Christian worldview can make connections. So for you, where's that line of, okay, this is completely secular, this is not helpful, things we should stay away from, versus, okay, let's find some positive things and what's beautiful and creative and to be celebrated among the things that it just comes to mind for me when Paul talks to the people of Athens, and he says, I look around and I see that you are a very religious people, and even something to an unknown God. So he was able to see something good in the culture that he was in order to kind of, okay, celebrate and let's move forward together.
Yes, absolutely. So, and it reminds me of one of my favorite documents from Vatican II, Nostra Aetate, which is on the church's relationship to other religions. It says in there, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but the church rejects nothing that is good and holy in these other religions, and that they all have these seeds of truth. And even in kind of the secular religions of the day and the secular ideologies of the day, there are good things. Speaking of U2, we did an episode on U2, and we had a famous theology of the body teacher, Dr. Christopher West, on, which was awesome to get to talk to him, because he's been very, very formative for me and a lot of people I know. But one of the things he often says in his talks is, he reminds us of Jesus's words that Jesus says, I did not come to condemn the world, but to redeem the world. And the devil cannot create. And the way he phrases it is that the devil does not have his own clay, meaning, there's nothing at its core that is totally evil, right? The devil can only pervert, he can only twist. And so he can take something good and crumple it up, but at its core, it's good. Even like really awful music or really awful shows, there's something in the human experience there which we can kind of unpack and we can learn from. Now, as you said, I think there is a matter of prudence and there's a matter of personal vocation. Okay, for me right now, should I be watching this show? Should I be listening to this music? Should I be listening to this song or visiting this website? And that's something to be discerned in prayer, maybe with a spiritual advisor if you're having issues with a spouse or a mentor or a close friend. You don't want to put yourself in a near occasion of sin where you might be tempting yourself towards lust or anger or envy or any of these things any of the 7 deadly sins that can come up when you're watching or listening to art. But I think in many cases we shouldn't just reject the world, right? There are good things that we can Because I think in our world, especially with the internet and everything, like you can't just live in a fortress and be Amish. I mean, maybe you can. I mean, some people are called to the cloister, but most of us, most of the time, we're going to be out in the world. And one of the faith skills that's necessary is to develop the mind of Christ, as St. Paul calls it, to be able to see the world through Christ-like eyes and say, all right, well, here's a song or a movie that's, real sexy. Like, what's the good there, right? Because God created sex. And sex is good. So what's the good desire there? What's the good thing? And then that helps us also identify what's not good there. And, so anyway, by identifying the good, it also helps us identify the bad. And I think that helps us redeem and uncrumple the thing and untwist the thing that has been twisted and crumpled.
Who are some of your favorite artists right now, would you say?
So there's a rapper named Toby Nwigwe, and I might be saying his name wrong. But he's out of Houston, and he's a Christian and just really great rapper, and I love his style. Really good. We just did an episode on Kanye a few months ago, and Kanye is a really interesting, talented guy who's also kind of crazy. It's almost like a mix of Michael Jackson and Dennis Rodman in a ways. So we had a really good conversation about him. So we also did a recent episode on Adele, which was really cool. Olivia Rodrigo is very popular right now, especially with young people. I haven't quite gotten to do an episode on her yet. I got to write an article on her, but I'm hoping to find somebody to do a good episode on her. Phoebe Bridgers is also very good. Haven't done an episode on her yet. Harry Styles has a new album out, which a lot of people really like. So he's also an upcoming episode I haven't gotten to do yet. Trying to think who else we've done recently. Those are the people that come to mind off the top of their heads. Yeah.
So good recommendations to go Google those artists.
Yeah, so and just try to have that mind of Christ, and try to recognize the beautiful. And when we see something that would be contrary to the faith, or recognize that first and foremost, this person is a child of God, and what is in their lyrics, what is in their heart that they're expressing, and how can we untwist that, and how can we kind of recognize a good thing in that. So
we didn't get a chance to touch on before, when you were talking about Awaken, about you making the leap into that full time. Was that a leap of faith for you? Are you happy that you're doing this kind of work? And what does it do for you as far as your own spiritual life, and hearing back from people about how they've been impacted and all of that?
Yeah, it was definitely a bit of a leap of faith. So I feel like God hit me over the head with the discernment book pretty early. I kind of had my I feel like a lot of people have their quarter life crisis just out of college, like, oh my gosh, I'm an adult now, what do I do with my life? And I feel like it hit me when I was like 20, because I felt a call to maybe to discern the priesthood. And so through most of college, and I was dating a girl very seriously, who was super Catholic, and actually she had a brother who was a priest, and she actually taught me a lot about discernment. So I had like this like super Catholic girlfriend, but also I was discerning the priesthood, and I was at Catholic U. We were going to adoration all the time, and doing homeless ministry all the time, and going to adoration and praying the rosary. So I was just like immersed in this Catholic world, dating a super Catholic girl and discerning. And we broke up for a while so I could discern, and got back together, we broke up again. And just kind of, so I feel like God taught me through that experience. It was a beautiful time, but also a very hard time. God kind of taught me some of the lessons of discernment. And at the same time, I'm reading about St. Ignatius and going on Ignatian spiritual exercises, retreats, and learning about his arts of discernment. And that has helped me know how to hear God's voice and develop a prayer life to know, all right, am I supposed to break up with this person? Am I supposed to marry this person? Am I supposed to take this job? Am I supposed to quit this job? And so that has really helped me navigate the ups and downs and the decisions of my 20s and 30s. And so I was doing that process again. It'd been a while since I'd had to do that process, but I was like, all right, Lord, are you calling me to leave my teaching job and to focus on this speaking and music ministry and to do this podcast? And that some of that had to do with my wife's career and what she was doing. She was getting a degree, and we had pretty much decided. I had been leading a retreat down in Georgia for a Franciscan parish, which was pretty awesome. And on that retreat, I felt like God gave me final confirmation, yep, at the end of this year, you should quit. And that was in February of 2020. And March of 2020, of course, COVID hit, and it seemed like a really bad time to quit your job. So, but it came to the end of the school year. I taught from quarantine, from right this room I'm sitting in right now. I taught my students for the last quarter through a microphone and a webcam, and it came to time to renew my contract. And my wife and I were just like, let's pray on it for a couple of days. And we're like, we had already discerned this, and now we're getting thrown off because it's scary, because it might be financially, scary for us. And we just decided, we discerned this. We shouldn't let this bump in the road deter us. We're going to proceed in faith. And it has worked out so well. Like, I feel like our home life is so much better. I get to stay home with the kids most of the time. And it's just, for us, it works. I know that's not how most Catholic families work, but for us, it's working. We're way more peaceful than we were before. Just the podcast has exploded a bit. Not that we're like the most successful podcast out there, but we're doing all right. And I'm really happy with it, especially when I get those stories back. And it really has been a journey of faith for me, and kind of a revival that I feel like I've needed for a while. I've been able to devote more time to prayer. And teach my children that as they're growing up, they see dad praying, and we take time for prayer during the day. And I've gotten back into spiritual direction, which I hadn't, quote unquote, had time for or made time for the past few years. And even went to therapy for a few months, which was really good. And just, I feel like the Lord has really given me some interior freedom in a number of different ways over the past 2 years that have really helped me grow into my vocation as a man, as a father, as a child of God, as an evangelist. So it's been wild.
Isn't it amazing how, I guess when we're young, you think that, once you decide, what your vocation is, your big V vocation, and maybe what your career path might be, that it's all going to just kind of unfold the way you anticipate. And here you are, like, you have to go through a discernment again.
Yeah.
And God calls you in a different way. And I just think that's so amazing, because it kind of goes against what people might think of when they say, okay, I commit to God and everything should be easy for me. And it'll all become very clear and easy roads. But you made a decision to kind of go out into the unknown, to use the terrible reference. But, like those kind of archetypes of you're on a certain path, but you've been called to a different adventure.
There's a certain, so the way I would often teach about vocation when I was teaching my students is kind of the 3 levels. There's the universal call to holiness for all people, right? Everyone's called to be holy. And then there's like life commitments. You make a decision to, I'm going to marry this person and commit to them until one of us dies. Or I'm going to commit to this specific way of life in this religious order, or to be a priest or a sister or consecrated. And but then within that, then there's the 3rd level, which is sometimes called particular vocations, and they're temporary things. And it could be temporary, like, what am I called to today? It could be, what career am I interested in? What job am I interested in? Am I called to move? Am I called to break up with this person? Am I called to date this person? Or it can be all sorts of little things. And some of those last for a day, some of those last for a decade. But like, when I took on a job as a high school teacher, I didn't say commit, until death do us part. I signed a contract for a year, and so every year there's kind of a little discernment of, am I going to do this again? And most of the time it was, but there are these times where it's time to reassess and say, like, where is God calling me? And I feel like, especially now that I'm married, there's kind of this dual discernment that we get to do together. And that's part of our prayer life together. That's part of our communication together. And it's tricky, but also beautiful. And it gives us a lot of confidence in our decisions, because one thing I've learned about learning the skills of discernment and learning how to hear where God is guiding your heart is that it gives you confidence when things get hard. So like, the first few years of our marriage were pretty tough. We had some really tough times, but because my wife was a woman of prayer and I was a person of prayer, and we both knew discernment and had discerned things before, when things got hard, what was in the back of our mind was not, well, maybe we picked the wrong person. The question in the back of our mind was, there was no question, because we had discerned it and we both knew that God had called us to marry each other. We just knew, well, things are hard right now, and this is the time to be faithful to the thing that God has called us to. So just having that has given us great confidence in the decisions we've made. Now, with something that's not as permanent, like something that's not marriage, like the job that I had, when things get hard, there's a discernment there. Are things just hard right now and I need to be faithful to this? Or is this maybe something that is no longer life-giving for me, that is no longer bearing fruit? And is this a sign that I should be doing something new? And again, that's something that you discern over weeks and months, not in an afternoon, so.
Mm. And I think I love the point that you talk about surrounding yourself with good people who, that's spiritual advisors and friends, and, your partnership, and people who have a spiritual sensibility about them, so that, if you're doing some of those little discernments, it can't hurt to ask for some advice, or to bounce some ideas off of another person who may have a different perspective, and say, look, Mike, I don't know about that for you, or hey, have you thought about this?
Mm-hmm. And I'm valuable. I'm so thankful for those friendships, and they're so valuable. But what our culture often teaches us, and this is one of those lessons that's often in pop culture and songs and movies that we really need to have the mind of Christ and be able to debunk, is that we should always follow our heart. Right. That's like in every Disney song, every Disney movie, everything. Follow your heart, follow your heart, follow your heart. Even my daughter, who's 6, the other day, she came up to me and she was like, I'm not getting to follow my heart. And I was like, oh, she heard that on some TV show somewhere. And so we had a conversation about, like, what's more important than following your heart is following God. And God will teach you when you can follow your heart and when not to follow your heart. Because sometimes my heart tells me that I'm worthless. Sometimes my heart tells me that nobody loves me. Sometimes my heart tells me that I'm awful and that person's awful. And that's not true. Sometimes your heart doesn't know what's true, but sometimes it does. And if we have our foundation not on the whims of our heart, but on God, then we can be able to read our heart and say, oh, well, this is fear. Oh, well, this is anger. Oh, well, this is selfishness. And that's not the real me. That's not the real me. That's my weaknesses. That's my sin. That's the voice of the evil one. That's the evil spirit. That's desolation. And here's the true me. Here's the me that Jesus created in me. And that's what's beautiful about this relationship with God, is it shows you who you really are and gives you something much more solid of a foundation. The end of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 7, at the end of all these beautiful things that he says in the Sermon on the Mount, he says, those who listen to my words and act on them are like a wise man who built his house on solid rock. And so when the winds come and the waves come, it stood because it was built on a firm foundation. But those who hear my words and do not act on them are like the fool who built his house on sand. So when the waves come and the winds come and the storms come, it's completely ruined because it was built on a foundation that wasn't firm. And so if we can, through prayer, through acting on prayers, they're learning to hear the voice of God by building our life around Christ, surrounding ourselves with those wise mentors and relationships. We're building our life on a firm foundation so that when the hard times come, when things get tough, we can stand secure because we're standing on that firm foundation.
That just reminded me of Maverick City Music. If you haven't listened to them, you definitely did. Yes, they have a song called "The Firm Foundation," and their little bridge is. And the first time you hear, I just laughed out loud. The first time I heard it, because he said, "Rain came, winds blew. My house was built on you." So this was like everybody like, "Oh yeah." Those things can come up against us, but we know that we've built our life on that firm foundation.
Yeah, that's a great song, and I love Maverick City. The other worship song I love, and I just saw Pat Barrett and Chris Tomlin and Hillsong. They were in DC the other night. Me and my wife and some of our friends went, but Pat Barrett has this great song called "Build My Life." I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and that just, oh man, singing out with 20,000 people. It's a beautiful experience.
Amazing. Well, I sure do appreciate you taking the time, and we'll have to do a part 2 sometime down the road. And I just felt that Jesuit coming out, that very like desolation, consolation, discernment. Any final words or thoughts for people as they're walking through this life and in making choices and incorporating art and creativity in their life?
I would just say, we all go through struggles. We all go through hard times. We all go through doubts. And if you're somebody out there who is struggling with your faith, if you are doubting, if you're angry at God, if you don't think God exists, you're convinced God doesn't exist, if there's some church teaching that you're really struggling with that just is filling you with bitterness, I would just invite you to, meditate on God's undying love for you and bring all of that and place it at the feet of Jesus. Maybe if you can find a chapel or a church where you can go and kneel in front of the Blessed Sacrament, because the foundation of all the church's rules about mortal sin, venial sin, and all this stuff that can seem just like a lot of rules and bureaucracy, at the core, it's all about God's undying love for us. And we're in June and we're celebrating the Sacred Heart of Jesus right now. And the devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, I think our evangelical brothers and sisters would probably just call it like a personal relationship with Jesus, but that idea that God didn't come to condemn the world, but to save the world. And he came to bring us light so we wouldn't have to sit in the shadows anymore. And so if you're feeling like you're sitting in the shadows, bring it all to Jesus. Just, maybe you need to go to confession. Maybe you just need to spend some time in church. Maybe you need to go put on some Maverick City, whatever it is. But find some way to just throw yourself on the Lord's feet because he's so good.
Amen. Well, thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
See you.